Hey fellow edu innovators, really excited to share with you. My name's Kyle Wagner. I'm a learning experience accelerator, learning experience designer, helping schools produce more socially, globally, emotionally aware citizens through project-based learning. Now, you might be wondering why I'm starting out this presentation on whole school innovation through micro schools with a picture of a video cassette tape in a giant circle. Well, I think the story is best illustrated through one of my favorite experiences, and that was watching movies every Friday night. You can see a picture here of my family and I watching a movie, and I believe that movie was Terminator 2, Rise of the Machines. I always remember that line, "I'll be back." And my dad used to make a stupid joke, "I'll be back, you be Beethoven." But anyways, I digress. We'd watch those movies every Friday night, and of course, the market leader of the video cassette tape was Blockbuster. Blockbuster was unrivaled as the video champion. I mean, sure, we had a local video store down the street, but it couldn't compare with Blockbuster. You get the movie popcorn, you go in, and I remember get these candy sour balls every Friday. Used to love getting those and saving up my allowance money. But that was a whole experience. And the reason I'm illustrating this story is because I think we all know what happened to Blockbuster. Blockbuster was leading the market. Blockbuster, there was unrivaled. You only had maybe a little small company, and I'll put this over here, called Netflix, right? Which was starting to offer some movies online. But no one would have thought that would have made a dent in the industry. Well, that was wrong. Of course, once the internet came about, that disrupted the whole industry. Once the internet came about, now Netflix started becoming a little slice to eating into that giant pie of what was Blockbuster. And we all know the rest of the story. Blockbuster closed its last stores about 10 to 15 years ago, and it is now no longer in existence. It's a distant memory. So how can we apply the lessons that we learned from Blockbuster to innovating in large schools, large international schools that are very similar to Blockbuster, who might be very, very good at what they do, however, who might become obsolete in the future? And that's what this presentation is about. So like Blockbuster, there was a very, very large international school. And we'll call that international school this boat right here. And that international school had over 2,000 students all the way from K through 12th grade. It had its graduates getting to Ivy League schools. 95 to 96% were passing the IB exams. They had AP classes. They had a very, very, very good reputation in the international school world. And that school was the International School of Beijing. So I'm gonna write that here, ISB. Similar to Blockbuster, at the time where it was thriving, they had no reason to change. However, they had a future part of their board, a steering committee, if you like. So if you're a school leader and you're watching this, I strongly suggest you have that part of your board. Not to look at what is really now trending, but what in the future are graduates going to need. And that future board looked at, well, what do future graduates, what kind of skills are they going to need that maybe aren't so important now? We know there's been a large disruption in the job industry because of many, many different events. And our future graduates are going to need skills that are different from today. So they had that future part of their board. Let's call it 2025, even though it was about 5-6 years ago. Let's still think in terms of the future and think, what are those skills that graduates are going to need? And they came up with, because it's very different than what it is now, as we know, they came up with 5 key initiatives. Now I'm going to create an acronym for this so it's easy for you to remember. And those 5 initiatives, first was the E. E stood for experts. How can we elicit and get kids more working with experts? Because we know future graduates are going to have a certain expertise, or at least know how to work with multiple different fields in terms of solving major problems. The N stood for nurture. Nurture the whole child. How do we nurture the whole child? Because we know our future graduates are going to have to be very empathetic. They're not just going to be going and filling out a punch board. They're going to have to work across multiple projects. And how do we help them build the empathy that they're going to need? In fact, the World Economic Forum bumps empathy up about 5 to 6 spots in terms of future skills. And that was only 2020. Imagine 2025. The R stood for relevant. What kind of relevant learning experiences can we create for students? How can we get them into their communities outside of the four walls and experiencing what the real world looks like, partnering with different organizations, solving real problems? So that's relevant experience, because we know future graduates are going to need that. The I stood for individualized experiences. How do we help learners to really understand and know themselves? That has a little bit with nurturing the whole child, but more specifically, what are their passions? What are their interests? How can they make a contribution with those things? And the C, and we always think of the C, we talk about the 4 C's, right? Critical thinking, creativity. But really, they were looking at how can we align ISB with the 21st century and what the 21st century really needs. So how can we critically align those skills that we know students are going to need, like creativity, communication, and collaboration, and how do we create a program that can do that? And if you put all of these things together, because right now the word's just it's enrich, okay? And if you think of the H as holistic, okay? How do we create a holistic type of program that does that? Now, of course, there are some changes they could make to the big vehicle, but there was things that were weighing the big vehicle down. And what we're going to call that thing is an anchor, okay? As you can tell, I am not the world's best artist, but I do like to draw to simplify things. So please don't judge me based on my artwork. That is an anchor indeed, okay? So this anchor, let's make that look more like a chain. There's things that were weighing ISB down that was preventing them from getting there. Now you could probably as a school leader think of what those things might have been. And I'm gonna list those things out for you. One of the things was a schedule, okay? They had very tightly packed schedules. Kids were going to many places throughout the day, and it was going to be very hard to make those big changes to allow for deeper learning experiences. So that was part of the anchor that was holding them back. Another thing that was holding them back was the silos. Okay, so I'm going to write that here. So here's another S. So we got the S's that are holding them back. We've got the schedule and we've got the silos. Teachers were in silos for the most part. They had their classrooms. There was some collaboration that happened across grade levels or departments, but you know, it's few and far between, maybe once a week. How can they make that a regular part of the lifeblood of the organization? And because you had silos, oftentimes you also had subject specific. So if we knew that graduates we're going to have to work across a number of different fields and relevant learning experiences, well, clearly we can't have a program that just teaches math or science. How can we mix those things together? All of those things were an anchor holding them back. So ISB asked itself a question. ISB said, well, what would happen if we removed that anchor? How can we remove that anchor that's holding us back, that's tying our ship to the port so that we can get our future graduates faster? And that's when ISB came up with a clever plan, and there's a lot of different businesses that do this. If you want to look up a book, look up Accelerate, XLR8. Very easy to remember, and it talks about the shifts companies will go through in creating an innovative wing of the company to break through farther or faster. And so what ISB did is it created a smaller ship, okay? And I'm going to put a little sail on it too, right? Because we think of the sailboat, and the sailboat is very much can be managed by the people who run the sail depending on where the wind goes. It's very hard to turn a big steamliner. And that small ship was called Futures Academy. So I'm going to write that here. And that's the program that I was fortunate enough to lead. I was recruited out of High Tech High. Based on my background there. If you've ever seen the film Most Likely to Succeed, you see that school is featured. And one of the great features about High Tech High is it's very small, schools are autonomous, and they've really created the structures and systems to allow for rapid innovation. And so Futures Academy was that program that could rapidly innovate. And now I'm going to take you through how Futures Academy did these 5 things and really enrich experiences for students. And then meet the Futures Academy team, or as we like to say, facilitators of learning. That's me, humanities lead, Ho-Ming, Chinese language facilitator, and Brendan, our math science facilitator. And of course, our 24 Year 7 students of varying backgrounds. Together, we made up Futures Academy. During our project-based experiences, students worked with all kinds of experts, from leaders of NGOs to look at water quality issues, to local craftsmen when exploring how to design food growing systems. Each expert acted as both a collaborator and a mentor for student work, and sometimes as evaluators to ensure students produce professional, meaningful products. Our small size allowed us to nurture all aspects of the child. With small advisories and daily reflection, we formed tight bonds as one cohesive community. With no set schedule to hold us back, we were able to get out into the community. From conducting field studies, to devising innovative food growing systems, to building connections with local villagers and residents, and working with real entrepreneurs in creating small businesses, and exhibiting work during large exhibitions both in school and out amongst our newly formed partnerships with the community. We also carved in time for students to explore their individual passions and interests, from building robots and exhibiting those robots at maker fairs, to designing solar water filters, and even learning the ukulele. We were able to change the way that we planned and worked together based on changing realities. We moved planning from isolated silos to collaborative spaces and converted the traditional classroom into a fluid, student-owned space. So we return back to our initial question: how to unleash whole school innovation through the use of microschools? Our school's answer was Futures Academy. And if you recall, Futures Academy was just supposed to guide the way for the bigger changes that International School of Beijing could make. And did it make those changes? Well, I'm proud to say that within a few years, not only were students more connected to their learning and have more meaningful, relevant learning experiences, they also showed gains and improvement in their academics, especially in the area of math, which is always alarming to see. And Futures Academy not only showed how students could learn and what experiences could be designed, but how they could take what was an experience for 72 students and apply those to 2,000. So the International School of Beijing has learned how to create flexible learning spaces, how to collaborate with teachers, how to encourage more meaningful experiences within the community. And so FA was ISB's answer. But again, you're a school leader who has your own kind of vision, your own stakeholders. And there are 5 key questions to ask, and 5 key questions not to ask when starting your micro school program. Hey, I'm back in my home office here in Hong Kong. As promised, let's get to the 5 questions to ask and the 5 questions not to ask when starting your micro school. This is based off a lot of lessons learned and a lot of failure. Number 1, what do I want learning to look like is a question not to ask. Rather, ask the question, what do we want our graduates to be able to do and produce, and what kind of learning experiences can help us get there? That focuses more on a we vision and less on a me vision. Second question not to ask is, what is holding us back? That gets people focused on obstacles as opposed to opportunities. The better question is, what do we have that exists right now that's already working, and what can we do to capitalize on that to create better opportunities for students? Again, that focuses on the positive. Number 3, how can we get the most students and families to join our program? Change that question to how do we get the right families and students to join our program? Make it known it's not a program for everyone. It's not replacing what you do or your values. It's better adhering to those in a faster way. Those students will be your biggest advocates. Number 4, how much will it cost to build a program like this? Get away from the money question. Instead, ask the question, what kind of facilities and resources do we have already that can help us do this right away? We started our program out of a dance studio. I'm sure you can too. Number 5, question not to ask is, how will this help us reach academic standards and help students do well in standardized tests? That's not your focus. Replace it with the question of, how does planning learning around meaningful experiences change the way students feel about learning and their academics? All of these lessons are in the book, Power of Simple. I hope it will help you in guiding your journey, and I can't wait for your questions and answering those in the next session.